Detroit's engine runs on Japanese brands. Toyota, Honda, Nissan, Subaru, Mazda, Mitsubishi, and Suzuki together provide 500,000 jobs and generate $170 billion in U.S. sales. But now, the White House is considering a 25% national security tariff on these vehicles. Most trade analysts think this is just typical political posturing, threats designed to extract concessions during trade negotiations that will never actually be implemented. But what's being proposed represents something far more dangerous: the potential destruction of America's most integrated and efficient manufacturing ecosystem. Having tracked automotive trade policy and supply chain dynamics for over 15 years, I can tell you this isn't just about car prices. It's about dismantling a $1.3 trillion economic engine that powers entire regions of America. Today, I'll break down the 4 devastating ways this tariff could destroy American prosperity, including how it could trigger the biggest manufacturing collapse since the 1970s, economic engine destruction, the $170 billion wipeout. If this tax hits, it won't just raise showroom prices. It'll ripple through the supply chain from Ohio's seat factories to Alabama's steel mills. The debate over a 25% tariff has evolved from diplomatic sparring to a real economic stress test. Since late 2024, talks between Washington and Tokyo have sent shockwaves through supply chains from Detroit's assembly lines to Texas, Alabama, and rural Kentucky. The White House is eyeing Section 232, claiming Japanese auto imports threaten national security. But what happens if these 7 automakers scale back or pull out of the U.S.? How many jobs, dollars, and economic points are at stake? Japanese automakers contribute $170 billion in U.S. sales, $47 billion in added value, and a $1.3 trillion economic impact, including fuel and services. Like a spark igniting an engine, their manufacturing drives hundreds of sectors: steel mills, logistics firms, Ohio upholstery shops, even Vegas startups coding aftermarket wear. In 2023, Toyota built 1.25 million vehicles in Texas, Kentucky, and Mississippi. Honda produced 970,000 in Alabama and Ohio. Nissan rolled out 770,000 in Tennessee and Mississippi. Subaru, 221,000 in Indiana. And the Mazda-Toyota joint venture added 150,000 in Alabama. Combined with imports, these brands hit 6.32 million units, 43.6% of the U.S. passenger and light commercial vehicle market. The numbers from 2022 and 2023 underscore the stakes. Toyota and Lexus alone sold 2.1 million units in 2022. A tariff could disrupt this massive economic engine, affecting jobs, industries, and communities nationwide. With an average dealer price of $38,650 per vehicle, these sales generated a staggering $169.7 billion in revenue after accounting for corporate income tax, state sales tax, federal payroll tax, and Social Security contributions. Approximately $24.8 billion flowed back to the U.S. tax system. When you factor in taxes from domestically produced parts, energy, and infrastructure costs, the total tax contribution jumps to $31.3 billion. While politicians focus on the headline tariff number, they're completely missing the catastrophic employment crisis this policy would unleash across America's heartland. Job apocalypse, the 500,000 worker crisis. What's at stake? Jobs. Using data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis and the Automotive Alliance for Innovation, here's the employment impact. Toyota, 35,200 direct jobs, 90,400 indirect jobs. Honda, 28,100 direct jobs, 61,000 indirect jobs. Nissan, 18,500 direct jobs, 47,600 indirect jobs. Subaru, 6,900 direct jobs, 14,800 indirect jobs. It's a total of 436,000 jobs, including 96,000 blue-collar direct jobs, 227,600 indirect jobs, and 113,000 induced jobs. Add in 17,000 white-collar jobs from consumer credit and leasing offices like Toyota Financial Services or Nissan Digital, and the total exceeds 500,000 jobs based on 2023 Bureau of Labor Statistics data. These jobs represent $93.1 billion in annual wages and benefits. Auto manufacturing drives 11 to 22% of manufacturing employment in 8 states. A withdrawal of Japanese automakers could spike regional unemployment by 2.6% in Mississippi and 1.8% in Alabama's industrial belt, hitting local economies hard. These brands have invested heavily in U.S. production since the 1980s, but the tariff could strain their already tight margins. Toyota 7.1%, Honda 5.6%, Nissan 4.3%, and Subaru 8.8%. With hybrid engine costs already cutting into profits, a 25% tariff could push these companies into losses, forcing tough decisions like backshoring production or freezing capital investments. Here's how domestic content stacks up for key models. Toyota Tundra Sequoia in San Antonio, 65% North American content. Toyota Camry RAV4 in Kentucky, 72% domestic content. Honda Civic in Marysville, 68% domestic content. Nissan Rogue Pathfinder in Smyrna, 58% domestic content. Subaru in Lafayette, 52% domestic content. This tariff doesn't just hit finished vehicles, it also targets parts like transmissions, batteries, and tech components sourced from Mexico or Japan, doubling the cost impact for manufacturers. However, the employment devastation is just the beginning. The real catastrophe lies in how this tariff could trigger a cascading financial crisis that reaches far beyond the automotive sector. Financial meltdown. The $58.6 billion revenue collapsed. The Congressional Budget Office crunched the numbers. If Japanese automakers' U.S. sales dropped by half within 3 years based on trends from the early 1990s after the Plaza Accord, federal tax revenue could take a huge hit. We're talking $18.2 billion less in corporate and payroll taxes in 2026 and $26.3 billion less in 2027. That's not all. Add import fees, logistics, rail leases, trucking, technical training, showroom rents, and dealer fees, and the total revenue loss could climb to $58.6 billion over 3 years. That's money not funding schools, roads, or healthcare. But wait, won't American, Korean, or European brands just step in to fill the gap? Not so fast. The Georgia Tech Logistics Institute says only 40% of lost Japanese sales would shift to brands like Tesla, Ford, Hyundai, or BMW. The rest customers might delay buying or turn to used cars because of sky-high prices and tough financing. This tariff shock could inflate supply chains, slow inventory turnover, and shrink the production base, hurting investment in jobs. Then there's the currency angle. Japanese firms are big players in the U.S. bond market, holding $1.06 trillion in 30-year treasury bonds. They help keep the yen-dollar exchange rate stable around 150 yen to the dollar. But new tariffs could mess with that balance, raising real interest rates and disrupting investment flows. If Japan unloads just 5 to 6% of those bonds, the Fed might struggle to find buyers for its auctions, pushing 10-year treasury yields up by 30 to 45 basis points. That's higher borrowing costs for everyone, and the $7.8 billion in tariff revenue could vanish if rates spike. Consider this. 3 out of 5 hybrid cars and 2 out of 3 subcompact SUVs sold in the U.S. are Japanese brands. A proposed 25% tariff on these vehicles could raise hybrid prices by about $4,400, even for entry-level models. Critical components like batteries, inverters, electronic control units, and cooling systems often come from Japan's Shizuoka region, or secondary plants in Southeast Asia and Turkey. But perhaps the most devastating aspect of this tariff isn't the immediate financial impact. It's how it could permanently destroy America's manufacturing competitiveness by dismantling the knowledge systems that drive innovation. Innovation destruction, the 30-year knowledge wipeout. For 30 years, Japanese companies like Toyota and Honda have revolutionized U.S. manufacturing with lean production methods. Think just-in-time, Kaizen, and more. These systems have trained 197,000 American workers in states like Tennessee and Alabama, powering everything from steel foundries to sensor cable assembly. If Japanese manufacturers shift production to Mexico, Canada, or Asia, U.S. suppliers could face a crisis. Their order books would dry up, forcing costly retooling to meet the demands of Detroit or European brands. It's like erasing 20 years of production know-how overnight. This isn't just about factories. The fallout could hit technical schools in North Alabama, materials engineering labs at Purdue, and countless small businesses tied to Japanese automakers. From R&D to skilled labor, the knowledge spillover that drives innovation could grind to a halt. The U.S. manufacturing sector sees a modest 0.22% annual productivity boost from innovation, what analysts call invisible GDP. But this progress stalls and even reverses when key supplier clusters decline. Ford, GM, and Stellantis are all in on full electric vehicles by 2030, meaning a pivot back to hybrid or gas-powered models would require massive new investments. Capital that's scarce on today's balance sheets. No U.S. automaker, not even Tesla, is planning to spin up an extra 800,000 unit compact SUV assembly line in the next 18 to 24 months. Even if they tried, the factory supply approval process takes about 22 months on average. At best, replacing half of Japan's production capacity with domestic alternatives would take until 2028. This gap could spark price shocks, drag consumer confidence down by 6 to 8 points, and derail the Federal Reserve's hopes for a soft landing amid rising inflation expectations. When price hikes hit in the third quarter, alongside consumer sensitivity to gas prices, we could see a surge in decisions like, I'll just buy a used Corolla, or I'll go for a diesel pickup instead of an electric vehicle. In Washington, the knee-jerk assumption that U.S. brands will dominate falters of scrutiny. This 25% tariff isn't just a tax on imported cars. It threatens to upend a complex ecosystem that took decades to build. We've examined how it could destroy a $170 billion economic engine, eliminate 500,000 American jobs, trigger a $58.6 billion revenue collapse, and permanently damage America's manufacturing competitiveness by wiping out 30 years of accumulated knowledge and innovation. The implications extend far beyond the automotive sector. If Japanese giants like Toyota, Honda, Nissan, Subaru, Mazda, or Mitsubishi pull back from the U.S. market due to reduced demand, the fallout would be massive. Hundreds of thousands of tens of billions in tax revenue, trillion-dollar supply chain plier, and a key driver of innovation could vanish. On paper, the trade deficit might shrink, but in reality, bond yields, logistics costs, used car prices, consumer debt, and inflation expectations would spike. Long-term, the damage could be even Japan's lean, high-quality production systems with high volume, high inventory, less flexible model risks eroding the efficiency gains U.S. industry has built over decades. Even in the worst case, if Japanese brands halt production entirely, the U.S. auto industry won't collapse overnight, but the system will slow, maintenance costs will climb, and the gears of progress will grind. The question isn't whether this tariff will hurt the automotive sector. It's whether America is prepared to sacrifice its most successful manufacturing partnership for the illusion of trade war victory. Thanks for watching. If you found this analysis valuable, hit subscribe for more insights on the policies shaping our economy.